Before we begin, make sure you're comfortable, because this story is not just something you watch, it's something you feel. And by the end, it may change the way you look at truth, trust, and the people closest to you. In a small town on the edge of Arizona, life moved so calmly and predictably that it seemed as if nothing truly terrible could ever happen there. People didn't lock their doors. Children played outside until late in the evening. News about neighbors spread faster than the internet, turning even the smallest event into a town-wide discussion. And that is exactly why what happened one summer became a wound the town never truly healed from. It happened during the annual summer festival, when the town square was filled with music, colorful booths, and the laughter of children. Among them was a 5-year-old boy named Ben Miller, red-haired, wearing a red baseball cap, holding a toy airplane he refused to put down all day. His mother, Sarah Miller, had been by his side until evening slowly began to fall over the town. That was when she told a neighbor she only needed to run home for a moment to get a warm sweater for her son. It was the last moment anyone saw their lives as normal, because Sarah left, and when she came back, Ben was gone. At first, no one believed it was serious. People assumed the child had simply wandered off into the crowd, that he would be found within minutes, that it was the kind of panic that often happens at public events. But as time passed, hope slowly turned into fear. Police searched the streets, the desert roads, and the outskirts of town. Volunteers walked through the darkness carrying flashlights, but no footprints, no witnesses, and no clues were ever found. It was as if the boy had vanished from reality itself. Then a theory emerged that changed everything. A few weeks later, investigators announced that it was possible Ben's own mother had abducted him and fled. It was never proven, but it was a convenient theory for a town desperate to blame someone so it could stop living with uncertainty. And the town believed it. The Miller home was vandalized. Someone spray-painted the word "monster" across the fence. Eventually, the case was quietly closed, leaving behind only silence and the feeling that something had never been finished. But then something even stranger happened. Sarah Miller disappeared too.
No explanation. No trace.
No calls. As if she had erased herself from existence, leaving behind only more questions. Years passed. 22 of them. Red Creek had nearly learned how to live with the story, turning it into a painful memory no one liked to mention. Until one day, a woman returned to town, and at first no one even recognized her. She was thin, tired-looking, and carried herself with quiet restraint. But when she signed into an old motel on the edge of town, her name instantly dragged the past back into the present. Sarah Miller had returned. By the next morning, the town exploded with memories, accusations, and fear. People talked about her at gas stations, diners, and across social media. Everyone believed they knew the truth, even though no one truly knew anything. Sheriff Thomas Gray came to see her himself. He had been one of the young officers involved in the original search for Ben, and now he looked at her as if trying to decide who she really was, a criminal or a woman destroyed by life. Sarah did not resist. She calmly told him she was not hiding anymore. Then she said the one thing that made Thomas fall silent. She was dying. Late-stage illness. And that was why she had come back, because she could no longer live with what she knew. When the questioning began, she stayed silent for a long time, gathering strength And then she started telling the story that slowly shattered everything the town had believed for over 2 decades. A few weeks before Ben disappeared, she had accidentally found a box in her husband's belongings. Inside were photographs of unfamiliar children, lists of names, addresses, and records she could not understand. That was when she realized the man she had lived with had been involved in something far darker than she had ever imagined. Her husband, David Miller, had been part of something, but he had not been alone. That same night, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, almost emotionless. It told her only one thing. If she spoke to anyone about what she had found, her son would disappear immediately. Sarah was terrified enough to make the decision that would destroy the rest of her life. She chose to hide Ben with a woman she trusted for one night while she figured out how to protect him. But the next morning, everything changed. The phone went unanswered. The house was empty. And later that day, the news announced that a 5-year-old boy had vanished. That was when Sarah understood the truth. She had not just been threatened. She had been used. And without realizing it, she had helped them take her own son. Then the case took another turn. A forensic audio test confirmed that one of the voices on a recovered recording belonged to the former sheriff of Red Creek, Thomas Gray's father. And in that moment, the town truly broke apart. Because the man who had once been trusted to protect everyone was now tied to the darkest story the town had ever known. Thomas could not accept it immediately. He locked himself in his office, replaying the recording again and again, trying to connect the father he had loved with the voice now tied to a crime. But when he finally walked out, his face looked different. And he said only one thing to Sarah. Continue. That was when the story finally moved closer to the truth hidden all those years. Thomas could barely bring himself to return to the interview room. Everything he had heard had shattered the world he thought he knew, and even the air inside the station felt different now. But he knew that if he stopped here, the truth might remain buried forever. Sarah sat exactly where he had left her, calm and still, as if fear had exhausted itself years ago. He sat across from her and quietly said, "You understand that everything you say now could reopen this entire case?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I have very little time left, Sheriff. I'm not here to protect myself anymore. I'm here so the truth can finally be heard." Thomas studied her for a moment. "What happened after the phone call?" Sarah lowered her eyes, as if stepping back into that night. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," she said softly. "I thought if I could hide Ben for one night, I could buy time." She took a slow breath. "I brought him to a woman I trusted. I told her I'd be back in the morning." Her voice trembled. "He asked me, 'Mom, you're really coming back, right?'"
She paused.
And I said, "Of course I am." Silence filled the room. Thomas tightened his grip on the pen in his hand. And the next morning, Sarah closed her eyes. The house was empty. Empty? Thomas asked sharply. Completely. No Ben. No woman.
No belongingness.
Just an open door and silence. Thomas stood up suddenly. "Did you go to the police?" Sarah gave a bitter smile. "That same day." "Do you know what they told me?" She looked directly at him. "They said maybe I had staged the whole thing myself." Thomas said nothing. "And after that, you disappeared?" he asked. "No," Sarah said quietly. "After that, they called again." He sat back down. "What did they say?" Sarah spoke slowly. They said, "You made the right choice. Now live with it. And don't look for your son." Thomas exhaled sharply. "And you believed them?" "I didn't believe them," she said. "I was broken." She looked down at her hands. "I searched for him for years, under different names, in different states. Every time I thought I found something, the trail vanished." Thomas leaned forward. "When did you finally get a real lead?" Sarah reached into her bag and placed an old photograph on the table. A young man standing outside an auto repair shop.
2 years ago, she said.
"I found this by accident." Thomas picked it up. "You're sure it's him?" "I wasn't," she said, "until I saw his hand." "What about it?" "A birthmark," she replied quietly. "A small crescent shape on his wrist. He was born with it." Thomas stared at the picture. "Where is he now?" "Nevada," Sarah answered. 2 days later, Thomas drove there himself. The repair shop sat off a highway, ordinary in every possible way. Nothing about it suggested it was connected to a missing child case buried for 22 years. Inside stood a young man behind the counter.
Tall, calm,
and strangely familiar. "Are you Ben Carter?" Thomas asked. The man looked up.
Yeah.
"Can I help you?" Thomas hesitated, then pulled out the photograph. "Do you recognize this woman?" Ben looked at it. Something changed in his face. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. "Answer the question," Thomas said. "Do you know her?" Ben looked away. "I don't know, but I've seen her before." "Where?"
Ben Fronet.
"In dreams." The silence became heavy. "Dreams?" Thomas repeated.
Ben nodded slowly.
"Sometimes I dream about a woman and a little boy, and I think the boy is me." The DNA results came back 3 days later. Thomas stared at the report before saying it out loud. 99.99% match. He looked up. "It's him." Sarah was standing in the motel room when they entered. She knew immediately, even before anyone spoke. Ben stopped near the door, as if unsure whether he had the right to step inside. Sarah took one step forward.
Ben.
He looked at her for a long time, then quietly asked, "Do I know you?" She couldn't answer right away. She moved closer and whispered, "I'm your mother." And in the next moment, he embraced her. For a long time, as if trying to recover all the years that had been stolen from both of them. But even then, the story was not over. Because one question remained. Who took him?
And why?
Thomas realized the case was much bigger than one family's tragedy. It was a system in which children disappeared and entire lives were rewritten. And the most terrifying part was this. Part of that system had existed inside his own town. When the investigation was reopened, names, records, and old connections began to surface. And his father's name appeared again, not by accident, but as part of the structure that had existed all along. Thomas struggled to accept it. But one day, he simply said to Sarah, "If everything you told me is true, then I spent my whole life surrounded by the people who took your son." Sarah looked at him calmly. "Now you know the truth, and now it's up to you what you do with it." After the truth began to surface, Red Creek was never the same again. The town that had lived for decades with this story, like an uncomfortable shadow from the past, was now forced to look directly at it. And the deeper Thomas dug into the old files, the clearer it became that this was not a single tragedy. It was a system, one that had existed for years and remained unnoticed precisely because too many people preferred not to ask questions. Documents that resurfaced connected the disappearance of children to people once considered respected members of the community. Former officials, law enforcement officers, even individuals who had long been dead, but still left behind too many traces for any of it to be dismissed as coincidence. And among those names, one appeared again and again: Thomas's father. He couldn't bring himself to even look at the files at first. One day, Sarah found him alone in his office at the station, sitting in the dark with those same documents spread out in front of him. "You don't have to continue if you can't," she said quietly. Thomas didn't answer right away. Then he finally looked up. "All my life, I believe my father was a man who protected this town," he said. He paused for a moment. "And now I don't even know who he really was." Sarah stepped closer, but didn't sit down. "Sometimes the truth doesn't make the past worse," she said softly. "It just shows it was already like that." Weeks later, official investigations began. Names started appearing in the news. People who were once considered part of the town's foundation were now becoming suspects in a case that could no longer be hidden. But no investigation could return the lost years. And no court could give those children their childhood back. For Sarah, the hardest part was not what had happened to her. It was what had happened to Ben. Because he didn't remember her. Not fully. Every day, he was learning how to accept a woman who called herself his mother, while trying to piece together a life that had been split in two. One day he told her, "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel about you." Sarah stayed silent for a long moment. Then she answered, "You don't have to decide right away. You have time to understand it your own way." And for the first time in a long time, he didn't turn away. Sarah's condition worsened quickly. She knew she didn't have much time left, and she refused to waste even a single day. She spent time with Ben, telling him about his childhood, about moments he couldn't remember, about memories she had carried alone for over 20 years. Sometimes they would just sit by the lake, the same place where he once was a child, and Sarah would quietly say, "I still found you." Before she died, she asked Thomas to come see her. He found her in a hospital room. She looked calm, almost peaceful. "You did the right thing," she said. Thomas shook his head. "I started doing the right thing too late." Sarah gave a faint smile. "But you started." She handed him a small key. "Storage locker at the bus station. That's everything left from my life before I disappeared." Thomas took the key, but didn't put it away immediately. "Why did you come back?" he asked quietly. Sarah looked at him steadily. "Because if the truth was going to destroy me, I wanted it to at least bring my son back." After she passed away, Thomas opened the storage locker. Inside were letters.
Dozens of them.
Each one addressed to Ben, on every birthday she missed, every milestone she never witnessed, every moment she was forced to live without him. And the final letter wasn't for Ben. It was for Thomas. It read, "You are not responsible for what someone else did, but you are responsible for what you choose to do after knowing the truth." Red Creek slowly began to change. Painfully, quietly, but inevitably. People could no longer pretend nothing had happened. And one day, a small memorial appeared in the town square, not for heroes, not for authority, but for those whose names were never returned. It read, "Sometimes the truth arrives too late to fix everything, but never too late to be spoken. And every year in July, one man returns, red-haired, Older now, he brings white flowers, stands in silence for a long time as if trying to hear something that no longer exists, and then walks away, back into a life that belongs to two families, but only one truth he will never forget.